So, with the latest announcements from both Yamaha and Seadoo for the 2024 lineup, has the JetBlaster got an opportunity to capitalise on maybe a bit of a boo-boo by Seadoo not going for that bigger engine and changing the product styling to what some are saying, the Fisher-Price toy jet ski, which is not a good title to have. That's not necessarily my sentiment, but we're going to get into it in this video and give you some thoughts, things to consider. So hit the subscribe button and let's get into this video. So what I've done, guys, is I've gone back to 2022 when the JetBlaster was announced. Years after, to be fair, the Seadoo Spark was announced, and I always felt when I watched this first promo video that it was a reactional, it wasn't proactive, it was reactive to what Seadoo Spark was doing at the time. And I've got to be honest, I probably watched about 20 seconds of it and I disregarded it, because to me, at least at the time, I thought it was kind of like a diluted version of what the Seadoo Spark was. It couldn't do wheelies as effective, it wasn't as light, and the only sort of thing about it that I thought, wow, that's really nice, is the throwback colours of that 2022, which they've now moved away from, which is odd, was very, very 90 reminiscent, and the fact that it's 55 miles an hour out of the box versus the Seadoo Spark being the 50 miles an hour. So if there was ever going to be an opportunity for the JetBlaster to capitalise, it was if Seadoo at the 10-year anniversary didn't really push forward for more speed out of that typically 50 mile an hour out of the box top speed on the Spark. So watching this video again now, I'm seeing that there is that playful characteristic in the Blaster. So for anyone that's comparing these from like a lightweight playful fun, which is obviously what this channel is all about, the Blaster's definitely going to do a lot of things that the Spark does, but I think the grumble, if you like, from most people that have tested these side by side, there's some really great comparison videos, by the way, where it's actually got both of these skis on the water. I think Watercraft Zone have made a really good video on it, so give that a watch. Was that you could do all of the things that the Spark can do, but it's more effort to do so. But then in like the side-by-side drag races or top end, obviously the JetBlaster is outperforming. Now for me, I always thought that Seadoo would remedy that in 2023, I'm losing track of years, when they came to the 10-year anniversary, because for as long as I can remember, Seadoo, well, the rumour has been that they would have put that 1630 into it. Now I know now we've seen the 24 lineup, it kind of seems obvious that they were never going to do it, or at least I hope they still do it, but everything points towards the fact they're not. So for me, they've had the top deck completely redesigned, but they've not necessarily capitalised on the actual, like ultimately riding a jet ski is all about the user experience from like a riding point of view. And I think sometimes in this day and age, all of the creature comforts tend to sort of take centre stage, like waterproof storage box, link queue system, which are all great, valiant, efforts from Seadoo. But if you just get down to the nitty gritty of why you jump on a ski, it's the blitz along the water. If you're on those smaller crafts, spin it on a dime, fall off a fair few times, and have a little bit of punch out of the hole, and have a nice top end. So for me, I think the gap has reduced somewhat, having seen what both of these are offering for 2024, and I can't see Seadoo introducing a faster Spark anytime soon. So let's talk about the product styling, which I think is the main point of contention and why the main reason I'm making this video. Seadoo's Gen 2 Spark is very bubblified. I said that in my other comparison videos. If you haven't watched that, go give that a watch. It's a bit more of a deep dive into the sort of announcement around the Spark, but it looks very bubblified. Now, I've seen YouTube videos where it has been described, as I said in my intro, as a Fisher-Price toy or like a Nerf gun toy. I don't know if that's a title that you would want to be associated with essentially a brand which I always think are ahead in terms of product styling. For me, when the Spark was introduced in 2014 and when the Spark was then, when the Trix was then introduced, the product styling for me was always exponentially further on, sorry Yamaha, than what Yamaha was. And I always think that was the case in the 90s as well. Absolutely love my skis from the 90s, love obviously the Wave Blaster 2, the Wave Raider. But if you always look, relatively speaking, it always feels as if Seadoo are a little bit ahead. Now, with some of the details on the new gen Spark, like for example, if you take that new screen on the Spark, I said it in my previous video, the shroud around it almost again feels similar to sort of the product styling of the JetBlaster, whereby they're prioritizing, we need to get a bigger screen in there, we need to get more info on the screen, versus no, we want a beautifully designed screen. And I know these are very, very small details, but if you think of the Gen 1 screen on the Spark, now I'm getting into a real deep dive here with detail, it's actually even got the fuel gauges which follow the profile beautifully of that little cutout chamfered design. You fast forward that to the new screen, conventional rectangular frame, shrouds look quite conventional. So on a product styling level, I think some of those gaps have been reduced. I look at the Spark now, And there's almost, like, to me, it feels like a level of like genericness. I look at it and I don't see as much character. Like, there was one thing you could say about the Spark. It was like so futuristic in a good way. It almost looked like, everyone said when the Spark was first introduced, this is gonna be, you know, like the next gen electric ski eventually. And as I said in my first video, I know everything electric is always typically way more diluted down from a product styling point of view. I don't know why. That seems to just be the design cues that the designers go for. But the JetBlaster now, with them staying with the same design, having some of those chamfers and nice harsher lines still in there, the higher top end speed, the punchy colorways, albeit I'm not a massive fan of the blue. I know Yamaha is typically always associated with the blue. I love the colors of the 2022 JetBlaster. Even when I saw that at the Southampton Boat Show last year, I looked at it and I was like, oh God, like they've really nailed it. Even the retro decals, it was just like, it was a joy to see it. But when I was looking at things like the trim buttons on the JetBlaster, it all looked very utilitarian. It all looked very fit for purpose. And then you compare that to like the beautiful design of the Seadoo Spark, there is a level of refinement there, which I think outperforms. Now, I still think Seadoo have got a lot of that. So it's not me saying in this video, oh, Seadoo have completely lost all of their finesse. It's just me saying that what they've done with the Gen 2 is made it much more mass market, bubblified. Said this a million times, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Whereas JetBlaster have you know, they've stayed with that formula of like that aggressive, racery styling ski, product styling. And for me, the way that's problematic for Seadoo is if you're someone who's entering the PWC lineup for the first time and you're looking at a JetBlaster and you're looking at a Seadoo Spark Tricks, one of them inherently just looks super sporty and one of them inherently looks more like friendly. Now, I don't know if that's a bad thing, but for me, when I think of a jet ski, I don't want friendly, I want aggression. Not aggression with no refinement, but aggression is in, you feel like it's gonna do something. And semantically, the Spark, first gen, looked like it was always gonna do something. It was like a bullet in the water. Now, the other part of this is obviously pricing. Pricing's gone up across the board on all of the skis. They're not cheap by any means, and all of the rumored stuff around the Seadoo Spark being under 10K and getting back to its roots, it was all nonsense because obviously there's price increases on the Spark as well. So I don't think from like a pricing point of view, I know some people are nitpicking saying, oh, the JetBlasters continue to go up, it's super expensive. The JetBlaster is a 55 miles an hour ski out of the box. Arguably that 5 miles an hour when you're cruising along a coastal line is the difference between maybe being satisfied with the speed versus not. Now, I know getting the front end up on a JetBlaster is harder work, it's heavier, it's not as light, you can't jump it out of the water as easy, and we don't know yet how good that second iteration of the IBR is on the Seadoo Spark. If they've nailed that formula with the tricks and gave it almost like an inherent feeling of more punch, if that's even possible, like I don't know what they've done with it, we haven't seen the ride plate, the intake gate, they've most likely left those details the same, but if they haven't, and that coupled with the new IBRs gave it more performance, like it pops out of the water nicer, then again, the characteristics could have gone through a whole new, you know, like life cycle, if that makes sense, for users to get used to. But it's an exciting time for sure. Have we got what we necessarily want out of each of the models at the moment? No. The JetBlaster for me is slightly too heavy, and the Spark now is still underpowered, and the product styling is arguably not quite as nice as what it once was. Guys, put in the comments what you guys think. On the Spark side, I do honestly think we're in for the long haul now. That is kind of a big step change from a product design point of view. That whole top deck's been redesigned. So the reason why I've made this video specifically is if the JetBlaster stays relatively the same, the likelihood of them improving the performance on the JetBlaster, I think is more practical and feasible. So you could potentially in the near future be looking at like a faster version of the JetBlaster. That coupled with what I think arguably now Gen 2 Spark versus the current JetBlaster, the product styling on the JetBlaster now sort of is slightly nicer than the Seadoo Spark, which I can't believe I'm saying. Typically, I have to be honest, I always lean towards Seadoo. I always prefer the product styling, but I just can't help looking at that current Gen 2, Mark II, whatever you want to call it, Seadoo Spark, and just feeling like it's lost. It's like it's had a like character identity crisis. It doesn't to me feel like it's convinced at what it wants to do. I think it will do once it pivots to electric. I think if they'd introduced that as the brand new all electric, I'd be like, yeah, the product styling all makes sense. But in a traditional engine, naturally aspirated, all of that jazz, it just needs a bit more aggression in it. It's like taking all of the lines away from a sports car. So I think people are going to start to look at those. If you were at a boat show, for example, and you were looking at the JetBlaster alongside a Seadoo Spark, I think your more casual fan would maybe go for the Seadoo Spark. Your families potentially, because it is much more friendly. And then for your people that want to get on the water and be a bit more of a hooligan, if you like, is going to be the JetBlaster. What I would still say though is if you're comparing Gen 1 Spark versus the current JetBlaster, I still would lean towards the Spark Tricks Gen 1, because I think the design of that, the finesse level was through the roof. The designers really just knocked it out of the park in terms of all of those chamfered lines, spit lines. It really does. I think the JetBlaster was trying to emulate what they were doing and they didn't do it as effectively. It's crazy how the scripts can flip. I think now the JetBlaster looks nicer than the Seadoo Spark. Still don't really like the product styling on the screens on either of them. The storage compartment to me now seems closer to the JetBlaster, and I always thought the JetBlaster looked not particularly product design considered. And when I say considered, what I mean is if you were sat on top of the Seadoo Spark and you look down, all of those flowing lines on the Spark just all look really, really nice and considered. Whereas now, at least when I look at the Seadoo Spark sort of storage compartment, it looks as if the space needed for the phone has driven the product design. And that's the way I felt that the JetBlaster kind of went. The fact that you could put a towel in it and a water bottle was like great, but it looked a bit clunky. It's really hard to sort of pinpoint what I mean, but in essence, when I say utilitarian or fit for purpose, the product design is led by the practical use versus the product design, sorry, the product styling is driving. Undoubtedly, they're both really, really great skis. You're not going to be disappointed whichever one you get out on. And obviously, as always, this is my take on modern day, trying to dip in it from a two-stroke fan's point of view. You're never going to get a JetBlaster to be a traditional Blaster 1 or Blaster 2. You're never going to get a Seadoo Spark to be an XP or GSX. All you can hope for in 2023, 2024 now even, is that these brands start to, well, they're not going to start to, but they'll bring in some of the details that we love. And JetBlaster, at least now, I hope JetBlaster in the years to come bring back some of those really leery colours. Seadoo Spark have seemed to have gone for, again, like this pastel colour palette. It's nice, it's just, again, quite soft. Goes into that bubblified, which is why I can tell people have said it's the Fisher Price. What would be interesting, though, is in the coming years, is if they bring in more leery colours on the Seadoo Spark side. Will that help bring back some of the intensities on some of the panels that we're sort of lacking at the moment? But I think inherently it's just softer. It takes me back to my D&T days at school when you would chamfer an edge versus fillet an edge. If you remember D&T, you know what I mean. Filleted edges always looked a little bit more lame than a nice harsh chamfered edge. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful. It's not a particularly deep dive into the specs of these skis because there's tons of videos out on there, but this video is specifically talking about the product styling and a little bit of a touch on the details. If you want me to make more videos like this, put in the comments. Also give me your thoughts in the comments. What do you guys think of the JetBlaster? What do you think of the original Gen Spark, the new Gen Spark? Thanks for watching, guys. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and as always, let's keep the classics alive.